There you have it from Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and Prime Minister Mark Carney. Not a no when asked about the prospect of a federal election if the federal budget, which is scheduled to be tabled less than 24 hours from now, fails to pass and essentially leads us to a Christmas vote. What are the possibilities, or what is the chances of that actually being the case? Here to discuss exactly that is our front bench tonight. Louis Hammond was a senior advisor to Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne. Dimitri Soudis is former communications director to former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. He's now a strategic advisor at TACT. Kathleen Monk is former director of communications to the late Jack Layton. She's now the principal owner of Monk & Associates. And Laura Stone rounds us out tonight. She's a Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody. Happy Budget Eve to you all.
Good evening.
Hi, Bashi.
Hi, Kathleen. I'll start with you because so much focus right now is on the NDP and what their move is going to be. How likely, at this moment in time, 18 hours before the budget, do you think it is that it forces an election?
Well, I've lived in Ottawa for a number of years, and there's no real such thing as a snap election. We always kind of know there's an electricity in the air that actually kind of speaks to, when parties are going to topple the government. That happened certainly in 2011, I know, when Jack Layton, despite being tried to enticed by the finance minister of Harper at the time was Ted Menzies, who literally came into the budget lockup, I remind you, with a list of goodies for New Democrats, and Jack still said, no, we're voting against it. There's normally an electricity where people actually kind of, that we're going into election. I don't feel that now. And it's not just because you've heard Don Davies and others muse about wanting to reflect carefully on the budget, but I actually don't think that Canadians want an election. I think, we're 6 months out since the last election. It would be historic if we were to face another election again in such short period of time. And I think, frankly, Canadians want to give Carney a chance. What his budget will say will determine how the parties will vote. And that's still going to take another couple of weeks. We won't be into the real main vote on the budget till well after November 17th. So kind of wait and see.
Dimitri, I think Kathleen's right, and Nick Nanos' numbers back it up. The Canadians don't have an appetite for an election right now, but politicians don't always decide to do things from a political perspective, that reflect necessarily where Canadians are at. So as you look at the different factors that might inform whether or not we head to an election based on this budget, where are you leaning?
So a couple of points on that. Number one, Canadians never want an election, and that's what polling demonstrates. But as soon as an election starts, it never translates, or almost never translates, into the ballot question. Kathleen is also right to say that you usually feel the electricity in the air in Ottawa when an election is looming, except in 1979. Mistakes do happen. And if the NDP or possibly the Conservatives want to have a few of their MPs abstain, all it takes is 3 MPs to vote the wrong way or to abstain the wrong way, and we may find ourselves in an election. The other surprise element is tomorrow's budget. Will there be anything in that budget? Will you have unions on one side or the Conservative base on the other side? So high spending, higher deficits than ever before, or drastic cuts to the public service on the other side that will make the reaction so toxic that both the NDP and the Conservatives will have no choice but to vote against it. So one thing about politics is a week is an eternity. So let's wait to see that budget, because the reaction might be very different 24 hours from now.
Louis, if you were to, I think if we were to observe the government 2 weeks ago, they certainly weren't conveying the idea that they were highly interested in the ideas of opposition parties. They definitely met with the leaders, but they weren't saying, oh, you know what, our budget is going to reflect the priorities that opposition brings to the table. They seemed like they were tabling a budget from a majority government. I would say over the past few days, though, that messaging has evolved a little bit, and I know behind the scenes it definitely has. How likely do you think it is that they are doing some politics behind the scenes and making sure, for example, that there's not so much austerity in there that it's an immediate no, pardon me, from the NDP?
Well, I don't think there's going to be any material changes to what they had in mind about a week or 2 weeks ago, quite frankly. And as I said on the show before, maybe what it was 10 days ago, Vashi, there won't be an election over this budget. I mean, you saw Don Davies over the last 24, 48 hours talk about, the fact that abstentions would be okay. Again, I really don't believe an election is going to be had over this budget. And quite frankly, if there were to be an election, I think the Liberals would welcome it. I mean, they're 3 seats away from a majority, and I can tell you something that a minority government dreams about every single night is about being a majority government, even though this government, quite frankly, has been acting like a majority government ever since it's been elected back in the spring. So again, I don't believe there'll be an election over this unless, as Dimitri said, something terribly goes wrong and goes off left field, if you will, where an election would actually happen by mistake, as it were. But again, don't bank on this.
Yeah, stranger things have happened, definitely. And you do get the sense that the Liberals are, Laura, probably the least adverse to the idea of heading to the polls sooner rather than later.
Well, they're the ones that keep bringing it up.
Yeah, they do keep bringing it up. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, the Liberals have talked about this for quite some time now, right? Like, or already kind of pinning an election on the opposition. And it seems like they're protesting a little too much for a party that doesn't want an election. I do think, quite rightly, that the polls and others are showing this is not really the time, that the public isn't dying to go back to the polls, and especially in Ontario, where we had both a provincial and a federal campaign this year. I mean, people are pretty tired of it, I think. But if the Liberals accidentally fell into an election campaign, as Louis says, they may welcome it, right? Because, despite the uncertainty that's still happening with the trade talks, the fact that the U.S. talks are now off, all of these moving pieces, Prime Minister Carney, I think, does kind of have the confidence of the public in being the quote-unquote right person for the job right now. That in 6 months might not be the case, right? I mean, I think and we're seeing from the provincial level, certainly among some premiers, the patience is wearing thin. So this could be an opportunity for the government. I think it's a unique time in the fact that the NDP has talked about abstaining from the vote. The NDP isn't really a cohesive caucus in the way that we've previously seen. So stranger things have happened, but it doesn't feel like right now the country's headed toward the polls. But we'll see what happens when the budget comes out and when the vote actually occurs.
I have a few minutes left, and I wanted to do one more round on the content, on what your expectations are about the content of this budget. And in particular, Kathleen, if you could identify, like, when you open that book, what's the first thing tomorrow that you're looking for?
Yeah, so the government has said their tagline is, build, protect, empower, and intergenerational investment. So I want to see actually what are the investments that will target that younger generation. Like, what are they doing for that? What kind of jobs are they creating? If they're going to be cutting back on some jobs in the public service, what other kind of investments to have job creation? What is the number of jobs they'll create outside of that? We're hearing in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of new jobs. How will they actually be created, and what will they do, and in what sectors? So that's what I'm looking for. I appreciated what Amanda Lang said earlier on your show. I'd actually also like a surprise, something in the budget that we can that is new, that we haven't heard before, that we can actually see the vision of what Carney's government is and what this build, protect, empower message really translates in terms of dollars and cents.
Dimitri, what's the first thing you go to when you get that budget?
That's an obvious one for me, Vashi, and you won't be surprised that I'll say the deficit and the deficit reduction and elimination plan, because the best gift that the government can offer to the younger generations is to stop mortgaging their futures. And what we've seen over the last decade is a Liberal government that said deficits will lead to prosperity. And right now, that's not what younger generations are feeling, that these deficits have actually caused in the reality of their dreams, their future, their ability to buy a home, and for them to have more opportunities and better opportunities than their parents did.
Okay, Louis, your turn. Number one thing you're looking for.
Number one thing is going to be obviously the deficit, because that usually drives the narrative around the budget. Is it going to be over 75? Is it going to be under $100 billion? I guess we're going to get the answer to that tomorrow, but very, very important in terms of how people are going to perceive this budget. Second thing I'm going to look for, obviously, is how deep those cuts that we've been talking about are going to be. And the third thing, I think very importantly, is what kinds of incentives are there going to be in this budget to try and attract more private capital to Canada? Remember, we're going to be talking about a lot on nation-building projects tomorrow, big astronomical numbers and investments. Well, the Carney government's been very clear. They're not going to bankroll all of those new projects. They want private capital to come in. Well, I've got news for you. If they want that, and if that is the objective, we're going to have to do better at having incentives to attract that private capital to Canada.
Yeah, how they keep saying catalyze private investment. Right? It'll be very interesting to see what mechanisms they spell out for doing that. Laura, last word to you on this. What's the top priority for you as you head into that budget tomorrow?
Well, the top priority for me definitely has to be, will the Liberals be planting 2 billion trees or not? Because
spoiler,
we are hearing that this is now off the table. No, look, I mean, I jest, but that's clearly one of the things that you know, the relics of the Trudeau era that the Carney government will now be ridding of, and they'll obviously say this is to save money. What other elements from the Trudeau days are going to be gone? I mean, if you just look at the narrative or the jargon from the Carney ministers, what the finance minister and others have been saying, spend less to invest more. Where are they spending less? Where are they investing more? I mean, this is the narrative that's been placed in our hands heading into this. So what are they getting rid of? Is it enough to spur the economy? And where are they putting those big dollars for future investment?